On the night of our family reunion, I noticed my name was missing from the guest list. Little did they know, I had a surprise of my own. I pulled up to the grand estate where our family reunion was being held, the gravel crunching under my tires like the sound of my own heart beating a little too fast. It was a familiar place, one filled with memories of childhood summers, running through the gardens, and the echoing laughter of relatives. But tonight it felt different. As I stepped out of my car, the chill of the evening air was a stark contrast to the warmth inside, where the lights glowed invitingly through the windows. I walked up the path, my footsteps echoing the ones I had taken so many times before. The front door was ajar, and I could hear the buzz of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. I paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. There was Aunt Margaret, her laughter as loud as ever, and Uncle John, who was telling one of his infamous stories with animated gestures. My cousins were scattered around, some engaged in deep conversation, others playing games with the younger kids. I glanced at the guest list pinned to the wall by the entrance, a tradition started years ago to ensure everyone knew who was expected. My name wasn't there, not even a mention, just a blank space where it should have been. A pang of hurt shot through me, but I pushed it down, reminding myself that this wasn't new. I had been overlooked before, but never so blatantly. I stepped inside, the warmth of the house enveloping me, but not quite reaching the cold that had settled in my chest. I moved through the crowd, nodding and smiling, but no one seemed to notice my arrival. It was as if I was invisible, a ghost from a family past that they'd rather forget. The room was decorated with pictures of our family's history, each frame a testament to our shared legacy. Yet, as I looked closer, I noticed something odd. In several of the newer photos, my face was missing or obscured, as if I had been edited out of the family's narrative. It was a clean crop, deliberate, like I had been erased from their lives as smoothly as possible. I wandered into the kitchen where the smell of roasted chicken and the chatter of my relatives filled the air. My mother was there, her back to me, laughing at something my sister was saying. She didn't turn as I entered, didn't acknowledge my presence. My sister, always the golden child, was in the middle of a story about her latest adventure. Her voice animated, her gestures as if she were on stage. I stood there for a moment watching them, feeling like an outsider in a place that was supposed to be home. The feeling of being invisible, of being cropped out of the family portrait, was overwhelming. But tonight, I wasn't just going to fade into the background. Tonight, I had something to say, something they wouldn't be able to ignore. I couldn't stay in the kitchen, not with the way my mother and sister were carrying on as if I didn't exist. So I slipped out, my heart heavy with a mix of nostalgia and resentment. The estate was vast, and I found myself drawn to the old study room, where my grandfather used to spend hours poring over books and family documents. The room was dusty, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather. I ran my fingers along the spines of the books, each one a portal to another time. As I wandered, I noticed a small, ornate chest tucked away in a corner, hidden behind a stack of old family albums. Curiosity piqued, I pulled it out, the wood creaking under my touch. Inside, there were letters, photographs, and a few legal documents. One envelope caught my eye, embossed with a family seal that I hadn't seen since my grandfather's funeral. My name was on it, written in his familiar looping script. I opened it, my hands trembling slightly, and read the contents. It was a letter from him, detailing a secret he had kept, a secret about a property that was rightfully mine, a secret my parents had buried along with him. The weight of the revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. I sat back, the chair creaking under me, and let the words sink in. My parents had excluded me from the family reunion, but they had done more than that. They had excluded me from my own inheritance, from a piece of our family's history that was supposed to be mine. I wandered back into the main house, the noise of the reunion now a distant hum. I felt like an observer, watching my family through a window, their laughter and joy, something I was no longer a part of. My sister was still holding court, her stories growing more animated with each glass of wine. My mother, ever the attentive hostess, was making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink, her eyes never once meeting mine. I made my way back to the study, my mind racing. The letter was still in my hand, the paper now crumpled from my grip. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let this go, not after all the years of feeling like an afterthought. I pulled out a piece of paper from the desk, the same stationery my grandfather used, and began to write. The words flowed, each one a piece of my heart, each sentence a step towards reclaiming my place in this family. I wrote about the discovery, about the property, about how I felt being excluded, not just from the reunion, but from my own family's history. I didn't yell, didn't scream, but my words were sharp, precise, and filled with the quiet fury of years of silence. I folded the letter, sealed it with the same wax seal from the chest, and placed it on the table in the dining room, right where they would find it. As I walked away, I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I was determined. I had uncovered a truth, and now it was time for them to face it. I left the estate, the night air cool against my skin, the sounds of the reunion fading into the distance. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The note would speak for me, and for once, I wouldn't be the one left out. The reunion was in full swing when I returned to the dining room, the note now sitting innocently on the table, like a time bomb waiting to go off. I took my seat at the far end, where I could watch the reactions unfold. The room was filled with the clatter of cutlery, the hum of conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter. My family was too engrossed in their own little worlds to notice my presence or the letter I had left. Dinner was served, and as the plates were passed around, the note remained untouched, a silent sentinel among the feast. I could feel the anticipation building within me, a mix of anxiety and a strange sense of liberation. I had never been one for confrontation, but tonight I had initiated it, and there was no turning back. The moment came when Aunt Margaret, ever the curious one, reached for a piece of bread and noticed the letter. "What's this?" she said, her voice carrying over the din. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the wax seal. A hush fell over the room as she broke the seal and began to read. I watched as her expression changed, from curiosity to confusion, then to shock. She passed the letter to my mother, who took it with a frown, her eyes darting over the words. The room grew quieter, the only sounds now the rustle of paper and the soft clink of glasses being set down. My mother's face paled, her hands trembling slightly as she passed the note to my father. He read it, his jaw clenching, his eyes narrowing. The tension in the room was palpable, like a storm about to break. My sister, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, leaned over to read the letter, her initial amusement turning to disbelief. The secret was out. The note revealed the truth about the property, about how it was rightfully mine, about the years of deceit and exclusion. It was a moment I had imagined countless times, but nothing could prepare me for the reality of it. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my father's chair scraping back as he stood. He looked at me, his eyes a mixture of anger and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "Alex," he said, his voice strained, "what is the meaning of this?" I stood up, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "It means that I'm not going to be invisible anymore. It means that I deserve to know the truth about my own family, about my own inheritance. It means that I'm done being excluded." The room erupted into chaos. Voices rose, overlapping each other in a cacophony of denial, anger, and questions. My mother was trying to calm everyone down, but her own voice was shaky, her eyes avoiding mine. My sister was arguing with my father, her words sharp, her tone accusatory. I let them argue, let the truth sink in, let the shock and betrayal wash over them. I had said my piece, and now it was their turn to deal with the consequences of their actions. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a play where I had written the script but was no longer an actor. The note had done its job. It had revealed the secret, and now the family dynamics were shifting. The reunion was no longer about celebrating our togetherness. It had become a battleground for truth, for acknowledgement, and for the reclaiming of what was rightfully mine. The storm of emotions in the dining room didn't subside easily. My father, his face flushed with anger, slammed his fist on the table demanding answers. My mother, tears in her eyes, was trying to explain, but her words were drowned out by the rising voices. My sister, always the peacemaker, was now on my side, her loyalty shifting as she confronted our parents about the deception. I stood there watching the scene unfold, feeling a mix of vindication and sadness. I had always known there was a rift, but I hadn't anticipated the depth of the secret they had kept from me. The room was a mess of emotions, each person grappling with their own guilt, anger, or surprise. My father, still fuming, turned to me. "You had no right to go through your grandfather's things," he spat out, as if that was the core of the issue. I shook my head, my voice calm but firm. "I had every right. It was my inheritance, my family's history, and you kept it from me. You all did." The accusations flew back and forth, my mother trying to mediate, but the truth was out, and there was no putting it back. My sister, now fully on my side, was demanding to know why they had hidden this from us, why I had been treated differently. The reunion had turned into a family meeting, a reckoning of sorts. The truth about the property had opened up old wounds, exposed long-held secrets, and forced everyone to confront their part in the family's dynamics. It was clear that the exclusion wasn't just about me. It was a symptom of deeper issues, of favoritism, of unspoken resentments. As the arguments continued, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my Aunt Margaret, her eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and regret. "I had no idea, Alex," she whispered, squeezing my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." I nodded, appreciating her support. The room was a whirlwind of emotions, but amidst the chaos, I felt a sense of clarity. I had been invisible for so long, but now I was seen, my voice heard, my place in the family acknowledged, even if it was through the pain of revelation. The night wore on, the arguments slowly giving way to exhaustion. My parents, now subdued, sat at the table, the weight of their actions heavy on their shoulders. My father, his anger spent, looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and resignation. "We should have told you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We thought we were protecting you, but we were wrong." I didn't respond immediately. The room was quiet now, the only sound the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I looked around at my family, each one processing the night's revelations in their own way. "I'm not asking for apologies," I finally said. "I'm asking for honesty, for acknowledgement. I want to be part of this family, truly part of it, not just a footnote in your stories." My mother reached out, her hand trembling as she touched mine. "You are part of this family, Alex. We've made mistakes, but we can make it right." The night had changed in everything. The reunion was no longer about celebrating the past. It was about confronting it, about healing old wounds, and about moving forward. I had reclaimed my place, not just in the family estate, but within the family itself. The road ahead would be long, filled with conversations, apologies, and perhaps forgiveness. But for now, the truth was out, and with it, the possibility of a new beginning. The morning after the tumultuous night at the reunion, the estate was unusually quiet. The usual bustle of family members getting ready for the day was replaced by a heavy silence, as if everyone was still processing the revelations from the night before. I sat in the garden, the early sun casting long shadows across the lawn, contemplating the path ahead. My parents found me there, their faces drawn, their eyes red from lack of sleep. They sat beside me, the air thick with unspoken words. My mother reached out, her hand resting on mine, a gesture of reconciliation. "We've talked," my father began, his voice hoarse. "We owe you an apology, Alex. We've been wrong and we've hurt you. We want to make things right." I looked at them, seeing the sincerity in their eyes. "I appreciate that, but making things right isn't just about apologies. It's about actions, about changing how we relate to each other." My mother nodded, tears welling up. "We understand. We've decided to set up a family meeting, not just for today, but regularly. We need to talk, really talk, about everything." The idea of regular family meetings was a start, a commitment to openness and honesty that had been lacking. We agreed to meet later that day, after everyone had had time to gather their thoughts. The meeting was held in the same dining room where the storm had broken the night before. This time, however, there was a different energy. My sister, who had been my unexpected ally, sat beside me, her presence a comfort. Aunt Margaret, ever the mediator, took the lead. "We've all said things last night that can't be unsaid," she began, her voice gentle. "But we're here to move forward, to heal, and to understand each other better." One by one, family members spoke. Apologies were made, not just to me, but to each other for years of misunderstandings, for secrets kept, for favoritism shown. My parents explained their reasoning, their fear of losing control of the family estate, their misguided attempt to protect me from what they saw as a burden. I listened, understanding more than I had before. The property wasn't just a piece of land, it was a symbol of our family's history, of legacy, and of responsibility. They had wanted to shield me from the complexities, but in doing so, they had excluded me from my own heritage. I want to be involved, I said when it was my turn to speak. I want to know about the estate, about our family's history. I want to contribute, not just be a silent observer. My father nodded, his face softening. We'll make sure you are. We'll start by showing you the property, by explaining everything, and we'll work together on decisions moving forward. The meeting wasn't just about the property, it was about us, about rebuilding trust and understanding. We discussed how we could support each other better, how we could celebrate our differences rather than let them divide us. Plans were made for regular family gatherings, not just for reunions, but for everyday life. As the meeting concluded, there was a sense of relief, of a burden lifted. We had faced the storm together, and though the path to healing would be long, we had taken the first steps. I felt a newfound connection to my family, not just through blood, but through shared experiences, through the honesty that had been so long overdue. Walking back to my room, I felt lighter, the weight of the secret no longer pressing down on me. I had reclaimed my place, not just in the family estate, but within the family itself. The reunion had turned into a turning point, a moment where we could choose to grow closer, to rebuild, and to embrace the future together. The days following the family meeting brought a sense of cautious optimism to the estate. The air was lighter, conversations flowed more freely, and there was an unspoken agreement to move forward with honesty and openness. My parents, true to their word, began to involve me in discussions about the estate, showing me the books, the ledgers, and the plans for the future. One sunny afternoon, my father took me on a tour of the property, something he had never done before. We walked through the fields, the vineyards, and the orchards, each step revealing a piece of our family's history. He spoke of the challenges, the triumphs, and the responsibilities that came with maintaining such a legacy. This land, he said, pausing at the edge of a vineyard, it's not just about the grapes or the crops. It's about the generations who have tended, who have poured their lives into it. It's your legacy too, Alex. I listened, absorbing every word, every story. The estate, once a distant concept, now felt like a part of me, a connection to my ancestors, to the land itself. As we walked, my father shared his vision for the future, not just as a business, but as a place where family could come together, where traditions could be honored and new ones made. My mother, on the other hand, organized a family dinner, not as a reunion, but as a celebration of our renewed commitment to each other. The table was set with care, each place card a symbol of our unity. The meal was simple, yet imbued with meaning, every dish a nod to our heritage. During the dinner, my sister stood up, her glass in hand. To new beginnings, she toasted, her eyes meeting mine with a smile. To honesty, to family, and to the future we'll build together. We all raised our glasses, the clinking of crystal echoing the promise of change. Conversations flowed, not just about the past or the estate, but about our lives, our dreams, and how we could support each other in achieving them. After dinner, we sat in the living room, the fire crackling, casting a warm glow over us. My Aunt Margaret, always the storyteller, shared tales of our ancestors, of their struggles and their joys. It was a night of storytelling, of laughter, and of healing. In the weeks that followed, the family meetings became a regular event. We discussed everything from estate management to personal aspirations. My parents, once the sole decision makers, now sought my input, my sisters, and even Aunt Margaret's. The estate was not just a business, it was becoming a family project, a place where we could all contribute. I found myself spending more time at the estate, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to be part of it. I learned about viticulture, about sustainable farming practices, and about the community that surrounded our land. I began to see the estate not as a burden, but as an opportunity, a canvas where I could leave my own mark. The healing process was ongoing, with moments of tension and old habits resurfacing, but the commitment to change was there. We were learning to communicate better, to listen, and to understand each other's perspectives. The estate, once a symbol of division, was now becoming a beacon of unity. As the seasons changed, so did our family dynamics. The estate thrived under our collective care, and with it, our bond grew stronger. The reunion that had started as a storm had turned into a catalyst for growth, for understanding, and for love. One evening, as the sun set over the vineyard, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I stood with my family, looking out over the land. My father put an arm around my shoulder, and for the first time, I felt truly at home. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice filled with hope. "Our family story is far from over." And I knew he was right. The estate, our family, was embarking on a new chapter, one where we would write our own stories together.